Greet our friends everywhere with Chapter 21 of For Such a Time as This, the story of Charles Finney. This is another in the series, Stories of Great Christians, and comes to you from the radio studios of the Moody Bible Institute in Chicago.
Pride, that's all it is, pure and sinful pride. I can't remember seeing such widespread pride anywhere as here in Rochester. What will the others say? What will they think? Pride. And there are so many, so close, but for pride.
Charles Finney had come to Rochester, New York, at the invitation of a church who needed a pastor, and thought to use Finney while they looked for a permanent man. Charles had not wanted to go. The churches of Rochester were bickering with one another and ignoring the message they were there to preach. The people were completely wrapped up in what we would call today social climbing. Rochester was the then Midwest's cultural center. Its population was largely professional and socialite in number. Finney was not welcomed. But almost immediately his efforts began to show results.
A few here, a few there, certainly, but what are so few? This city is in such great need, and all they do is sit around sipping grog and chattering about some revolution over in France. It's here the revolution's needed.
Please, Charles, I agree, but not here in this room.
And it's just pride that keeps them from coming. Oh, they sit in the meetings. Curiosity's always been a great help to me. And they chatter when one or two of them come out of their selfish boxes. And some of them, I've seen them, some of them almost break down. But pride.
It's a problem with all of us, Charles. You can't judge these poor people.
I'm not judging, Lydia. He that believeth not is condemned already. That's what the Scripture says.
I've heard it before, Charles.
If only they'd take what I say seriously. As if what I was saying was more than something to chatter about at grog the next day. I've never preached so hard in my life, Lydia. And they just sit. Some with tears in their eyes, but they sit. Pride.
And what about your pride, Charles?
Oh, I don't understand.
Please, sit down and try, just for a few moments, to listen to me with both ears.
Oh, all right, but I don't see what this
Please,
has to
Charles,
do with...
both ears.
What do you mean, my pride?
Just that.
My pride was smashed by God years ago in a small clearing in the woods.
Was it?
I wouldn't be here in Rochester preaching if it hadn't been.
And once a man's pride is smashed, as you call it, does that mean he's free from it forever?
Well, no, I
Please
suppose
understand,
not.
Charles. I don't want to hurt you in any way, but I have to say what I'm about to say.
Please do, dear. I always value what you have to say.
Charles, you came to Rochester after big and successful meetings in great towns like Philadelphia and New York.
Yes, but what is that?
You had nearly 100 offers from various towns and cities to hold meetings there, didn't you?
Something like that.
But God said Rochester, and so we came.
Lydia, I know all this. Why are you...
For one very important reason, Charles. You came to this city as Charles G. Finney, the famous evangelist.
Nonsense. Most of these people have never even heard of me.
That's what you found out after we arrived.
Lydia, I wish you'd come to the point.
I'm already there, Charles. The great Charles G. Finney comes. He preaches. And he's met with silence. He tries harder, and a few respond. What's happened? Has the great evangelist lost his touch? Has God forsaken him?
Lydia!
Listen to yourself, Charles. Telling how hard you're working, how much you're trying. Might it not be, Charles, that your pride is suffering just a little?
Oh, yes, it might be a little...
I'm sorry I said all that.
No, please don't spoil what you just said. It's true, Lydia. My pride has been stinging under such a mass of dull ears. I can't seem to make them respond, and that hurts me.
Charles, it isn't wrong to be concerned over the souls
It
of
is,
these people.
the way I'm concerned. I remember an old man who used to live a few miles away from my father's farm back east. He was a real marksman. They used to say he could shoot a wart off a man's nose at 100 paces so clean the man would never know when the bullet went by.
Charles.
That's what they'd say. Anyway, he had a habit of cutting a chip in his rifle handle every time he dropped anything larger than a rabbit. Well, every spring he used to come around and visit my father, and every boy from around there would try to count and see how many new chips were in that handle. That's the way I am, Lydia.
Not you.
That's right. Look at me here in Rochester. The hunting hasn't been so good, and I haven't many chips in my Bible to impress people.
Oh, Charles.
That old fellow I was telling you about, he knew good and well that the number of chips on his rifle handle was a big point of conversation after he left. And he'd always lay that rifle real casual-like by the door, with a new chip showing in toward the room, so everyone had a good view and plenty of time to count.
I don't think you're that bad,
It isn't a matter of being that bad or this bad. It's pride. Just what I was yelling about a few minutes ago. And you? You went and held up the mirror. I'm going out for a walk, Lydia. Be back in a little while.
I understand. You better wear a coat. The night air's chilly.
I will. Don't feel like you have to wait up for me. You take care of yourself and that little one that's growing in there.
Don't worry.
And, dear...
Yes?
Thank you. I love you. A little more that way, Frank.
Yeah.
Good. Now, you can push it back against the wall all the way.
I think so, Mr. Finney.
Good. That's it.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear it. Now, let's see what we done here. I was so busy pushing that bench around that I... huh?
What's the matter?
Well, look at her, Mr. Finney.
Oh, I still say, what's the matter?
Well, we went and got the thing in backwards. Well, I don't think that's no laughing matter, Mr. Finney. That bench is a mite heavy to be pushing all over Kingdom Come. Excuse me.
No, that bench is exactly where I wanted it. I appreciate your help.
Yeah, but it's pointed the wrong way. Now, who's going to sit right up here in front of the church, facing the whole congregation like this?
That was what I was about to ask.
Oh, hello, Dr. Penny. What brings you to Third Church?
An invitation, but it can wait. I'd like to know what this bench turned backwards is doing in your church.
Well, this bench turned backwards, as you call it, is the anxious seat.
Anxious seat?
Anxious about what?
Souls, my friends. It finally came to me. What this town of great pride needs is a place to publicly confess anxiety.
Huh?
At so many meetings, there have been those who, but for pride, I know, would have given themselves to God. But they didn't want to appear concerned. It wasn't the thing to do. That business about fools coming to scoff and staying to pray happens only in poems.
I know what you mean, but how does this bench, this anxious seat, change things?
Well, it changes everything. It's a place to come for the anxious, to confess their inner struggles.
You mean right up here, in front of, facing everybody?
Oh, Finney, you must be joking.
Why? What's the matter?
Well, I'd never do it.
Dear fellow, can you honestly imagine one of the town's better lawyers or doctors or teachers getting up and coming down front here to sit and face the congregation and say, I'm worried about my soul? The idea is absolutely absurd. You'll make it harder than ever for those in attendance to meet with God.
No, Dr. Penny, it'll be easier. I've done a lot of talking to God about pride the last few days. Most of the talk's been about my pride. But I can't help feeling it mount up in a little anger when you tell me I'm going to make it harder for the people of Rochester to find God. If you and the other ministers in town had been doing your jobs all along, there'd be no need for my coming here. And Oh, I'm sorry I said that. That's the pride I've been talking to God about. I'm no better than you, but I sure come close to feeling it once in a while.
Mr. Finney, there are times when people say things to me to make me angry. I don't believe you just did that. In fact, I'm forced in all honesty to admit that the influence of religion in Rochester has been very slight. Maybe you're not as proud as you think. Maybe you're just honest.
Oh, Dr. Penny, can you imagine what this town would be like if God were to take charge?
And this anxious seat?
I believe God brought the idea to my mind. Rochester is a city of extreme pride, and extreme measures must be taken to combat it. Sometimes in the past, when someone in the congregation looked like he was ready to abandon himself to God, I've called on those who felt that way to stand. It gave them an action, a movement that amounted to public confession. Well, it all came to me yesterday. Now, here sat all these poor, proud folks, feeling strong the conviction of God's Holy Spirit. But there's nothing for them to do. So they leave the meeting, maybe shaky inside, and in a few days, with the help of a few quarts of grog, they're back to normal. Now, just suppose, right at the time they're feeling the strongest pull by the Spirit of God, I was to give them something to do to express that pull. Suppose right then I was to say something like, "Friends, those of you who are genuinely anxious about your eternal souls, don't sit there running the risk of moving away from God even farther. If he's talking to you tonight, you know it. Come right on down in front here and sit on the anxious seat. Show him you're concerned enough to step out." Don't you see, Dr. Penny? Right then they're a lot more able to move than they would be later. And once the move has been made, it isn't half as hard to stand on the new ground. Yes, the anxious seat. I'm sure it will help.
Say, heard what's happening over in Rochester?
Some religious meeting, I think.
Religious meeting? Whole city's turning upside down, more like it.
Oh?
Well, everywhere you go, folks talking about religion. In shops, on the street, in homes. Grog shops are closing.
Do tell.
I hear the theater's being turned into a livery stable.
Don't sound like the Rochester I know.
Ain't the same Rochester at all. Not since that fella Finney came. Doctors, lawyers, them social butterflies, the whole bunch get religion. Rochester's a changed city. They say it's getting so the police and the judges ain't got nothing to do. Crime's dropped off so.
Say, know anybody in town going over to Rochester?
Sure do.
Good. I'd like to see what's happening for myself.
Well, come on. I'm driving my team in this afternoon. I figured I might even try to hear one of Finney's sermons.
And so we conclude Chapter 21 of For Such a Time as This, the story of Charles Finney. This is another in the series, Stories of Great Christians, and comes to you from the radio studios of the Moody Bible Institute of Chicago.